rooms were as insightful and engaging and generative as my groups were or was. I'm sure we could have spent even more time having more conversations. At least from my group, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of my group per se, but at least what I heard a lot was that several people are trying to think, you know, this is great information, this is new information for some people, and now what's the not the so what, that's not right, it's the how, or like what's the next step in the how do I implement it in my practice, whether it be in my interactions with people, with my interactions with students, colleagues, or even how do I take some of this knowledge and incorporate it in the curriculum. So, and that's not, I hope I'm not watering down all of my group's conversation, but what are some other big topics that came up in some of the other breakout groups or rooms?
I can share quickly that our group talked quite a bit about how we use numbers, and can numbers be sort of within sort of critical frameworks? How do we understand the complexity of that? And, you know, where are the, you know, can these two things be reconciled? How do we lean into it? We had a pretty incredible conversation. Thank you, my group. I'm seeing them come into the room now. And then we shared some resources, some books that might help us kind of think through some of the tensions and possibilities of doing that work. So I think it was, so we focused quite a bit on sort of the conversation around quantitative methods and ways that we can, how do we move forward in that, and how do we do that work critically, right? Talking about, you know, that, you know, can we do this work without rest, you know, how do we deal with positivism in the context of that work? Where, how do, you know, what, you know, are numbers the point of depart, you know, so we really kind of talked quite a bit about some of the complexities in that. That was our conversation. If anyone else wants to add, I'm just sort of sharing out what we talked about.
I want to say that in the room that I visited, actually I visited all the rooms, but one of the, I want to say, darker moments in my thinking, right, was this perhaps reconceptualization or interrogation of what is surviving, because I remember Adrian saying that to survive often is what we're reaching for. But given that this is a year, marking a year of reflection of George Floyd, I started to ask myself, is George Floyd surviving? How has George Floyd survived? And what does that mean in terms of what a critical perspective and agenda means in terms of our work in society? And so that's, I can't say that I have a light at the end of the tunnel with that question, because we are where we are in terms of this marking the year. But I also want to say that perhaps we are his survival, and that we move his story forward, his experience forward, in a way that, and many like him, Breonna Taylor and so forth, that can lead to others surviving. So I think in our group, one of the takeaways was that we should be about creating those spaces of survival for as many as we can.
Any other reactions or reflections from your breakout rooms?
There's a couple of hands, Vanessa and then Charity.
I can go ahead and I didn't get a chance to talk in the breakout room too much because I've been reflecting a little bit more on everything that's been discussed. And I'm at a Hispanic serving institution in a majority minority metro city, which is San Antonio, Texas. And in this conversation of critical quantitative work, in the context of an HSI, in the context of the most spatially unequal city in the United States. One of the issues that I have is kind of opposite perhaps than what you all might be having as a scholar, a quantitative scholar, at least somebody who's trying to push critical quantitative work. A lot of my students coming into the PhD program as well as the master's program have been funneled through an educational system that has oppressed them. And so one of the issues that I have is that my students are refusing to take quantitative courses. And so a lot of times our quantitative courses are not making, and a lot of their arguments are centering around the validity of what we've been talking about here, about how data is structured and the politics of data. What's happening then is that most are going towards qualitative, which is perfectly fine. I myself am trained in both, but I also understand how quantitative gets used, particularly from a political space. And I don't know what to do about that. And as far as our College of Education is concerned, we don't know either. And so what tends to happen is scholars of color aren't trained in quantitative methods to even begin to think about these conversations that we're having in this workshop. So it's just something that I wanted to bring up to you all as colleagues in this work, but this is where my thoughts have been going so far.
Vanessa, can I react to this one? Because I think this is one of the reasons why we have ICQCM. I mean, we literally thought and have heard the same among our colleagues and so forth, but I'll share this as what I would say to others. We should be concerned with all research, because when you think about it, the cultural poverty theory, which has been one of the most devastating theories that related to the entire onslaught of our social welfare system, was put forward through qualitative work, The Children of Sanchez by Oscar Lewis, that then moved forward in other iterations, to present day, where some people would look at the burden of acting white as yet another manifestation through anthropological work and ethnographic work that has been, highly suspect too in its impact, at least in terms of promoting deficit narratives of Black interest in learning. So I want to say that qualitative work has done its damage too. And so we need to be cognizant of that and clear that any type of empirical research that's done within a context of white supremacy and rewarded by structurally racist systems, which really constitute the whole profession of the professorate in the academy, are suspect. Okay, so I just don't think that there's any type of work that's exempt. And so we need to be careful, even when we start thinking about DEI work. And I had this conversation with someone the other day where they were saying, listen, I'm teaching individuals how to talk about critical race theory without naming it. And they were actually advising a law school on a tenure review process in order to better reward people who do that type of work. But then I said, well, you do know you're dealing with entire disciplines and fields that name a thing what it is. And basically what you're doing is you're teaching other colleagues to frown upon those who choose to name what it actually is, name it what it actually is. And so, yes, there are ways in which even the allies that we have, and some of us too, right? People of color, minoritized people, actually promote agendas that are not within our best interest. So I just want to put that out there to say that all research should be held to the standard of being about the liberation of Black, Brown, and Indigenous bodies.
I want to thank everybody for your contributions. It's very a lot of good stuff to process. I don't have a community of scholars, and I know a lot of us are siloed and isolated on our campuses. So this is very refreshing. But Vanessa, to your point, we kind of talked about that a little bit in our group. And Veronica made a great point about how we need to kind of suture our relationships to ideas of data and numbers by recognizing that we have always had, scientific, mathematic, quantitative knowledge and experience. It just hasn't been presented that way. It hasn't been visible, right? I think that's the key of what we need to model to our young people, right? Because all of them are not going to be in academia, but all of them do need to at least be able to see statistics and not turn away, but be able to engage with them in whatever space they're in, to be critical, to understand, how to analyze and break down. But I think that's work that takes place kind of outside of academia, right? I think the work has to be supplemental. So when students do enter academic spaces, especially violent academic spaces that weaponize numbers against people of color, they need to be prepared before they go into that space. And I can say this as somebody who I had just, most professors in grad school that teach statistics are super racist, but mine was super, super racist. And I ended up failing quantitative methods in grad school once and having to take it in the math department, right? Just for what I felt was a safer environment. And for me, being prepared outside of the institution. So when we go into these spaces, our young people already have, I think what Doc was talking about is that confidence, right? That self-esteem to say, I know that I can pass this class. I know that, what you're presenting to me is not going to necessarily align with my reality, and not to feel down, not to feel discouraged. And I say that I teach at a HBCU, and statistics is the thing that prevents students from graduating year after year after year after year after year. I literally have a brilliant student, and this is going to be the third time they have to take statistics, right? And we're trying to figure out ways to empower them outside the classroom. So when they come into that space for that 75 minutes, they can handle what they need to handle until we get more people like us doing the actual teaching, right? So in the meantime, we have to find alternative or supplementary ways to prepare our young people for what they're facing when they go into these dangerous spaces. The second comment I wanted to make, when Otis talked about survival, it's super heavy. Like, I'm from Minneapolis. Like, I was like born like probably 34th in Chicago. So 38th in Chicago is a very, like, everybody knows that area. My work is also on systemic police terrorism, but I think that we don't give survival enough credit, right? I don't think we acknowledge that in a society that has literally tried to kill us all in every way imaginable, the fact that we have survived is probably the most magnificent thing that we can do, right? So I think that we're always looking for something beyond survival, when the fact that we're not all gone is really something that we need to celebrate more, instead of saying, but what else can we do, right? Because just to exist, not to be completely insane, not to all want to figure out, that's something that we really, 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 and I tell this to my students, right? Sometimes surviving, especially in the pandemic, sometimes surviving is really the best you can do, right? I think sometimes you're always looking for more, but in a place that, whether you're talking about environmentally, educationally, psychologically, every way imaginable, our erasure has been intentional, but we're still here. That for me is enough to push me on my worst days, right? Because I'm literally here, right? So I think we need to give the idea of survival way more credit, because it seems like a consolation, when actually, to me, that's a win, right? So.
That is so dope, Charity, and I appreciate your comment. I said on there, I thought that it was, that this is the kind of the creep of neoliberalism that that our students hear and feel like they have to internalize as well. And I mean, it's the stunning one that scholars would think they have to brand themselves, but this idea of branding, you know, it drives the, what you're saying is that you can't, you know, it makes the kind of the the violence of capitalism gets, we obscure the kind of the dopeness of surviving in a system that is violent. It's violent on every level. It's violent psychologically. It's violent emotionally. It's violent spiritually. It's violent, obviously economically. And then we're still, you know, encouraged to hustle and be entrepreneurial. And our students are surrounded by that messaging. The entrepreneurial university, that's that, and this is not just Illinois, it's all over, you know, right? So universities are trying to figure out now, how do they exist in a post-pandemic kind of context? And they're, you know, using this language of entrepreneurialism, and it's eking down to, you know, to faculty. And what's even hurtful to me is that young Black folks, young scholars, new scholars, our students are all using this idea that now everybody has a goddamn brand. And the very thing that's killing you, you know, again, this is how we get caught up in white supremacy. That, you know, we're caught up in a system that is killing us, and we still walking around trying to talk about, I got a brand. You know, that's just insanity. And I'm not blaming people for doing that. I'm saying that's how this system got us all fucked up. And that our challenge is to push back on, I'm sorry, there's cars. I'm sorry about the noise. Our challenge from a critical perspective is to, one, make those things plain, make that plain, and then to push back on it. And although I'm a critical race theory scholar and I'm more interested in qualitative research, to Otis's point, you know, a lot of damage has been done, regardless of the methodology, when we've talked about people of color. And so to the larger point, again, about, you know, being mindful of how we're participating in systems that are killing us, and that every day when you wake up on this side of glory, that's radical and dope. And I'm done.
Yes, all of that, and more. I mean, there were so many comments that I heard going, you know, through the rooms that, wow, I don't know that we could in any way kind of appreciate fully the richness and the depth and really the sincerity of the comment. So I want to close and thank Dr. Burt and definitely the panelists for what was, you know, an event that far exceeded where I thought we would be. This has been wonderful. I've learned, and I hope you all have too. And just to think about the path forward. And I should apologize again, because I didn't, while I introduced the panelists to ICQCM, I did not introduce the two cohorts to the panelists. And so we do have the William T. Grant Advanced Quantitative Computational Scholars cohort with us, and the QCM, which is the Quantitative, Computational, and Mixed Methods cohort from the National Science Foundation. And they are postdocs, faculty, and career scientists. But this was their first panel. So I want to thank you all for providing the rich context for them to move forward. We hoped that this would be the type of conversation that it was, really framing what then will facilitate us taking a deep dive, and one that will get to practical and applied significance for the work that our scholars are doing. So yes, we're going to take what you've provided us, this rich conversation, and actually try to actualize it, to realize it into a critical methodology, not only through the curriculum that we've put together, but also through the actual work of the scholars that they are cultivating during their time with us. So I want to thank the panel in advance for the work that you're going to do in the work that they do, our scholars do later on, because I'm sure that what you've said today will really help guide them in doing that work. So thank you again. I want to ask Ezekiel or Ebony for any closing comments, and then we can adjourn.
This was a fabulous panel, fabulous conversation, period, with a T.
I just want to say to my sorority sister, Adrienne Dixon, I really appreciate you, because, folks be real upset that they can't make institutional changes and dismantle structures of racism in the 4 to 6 years that they're on the campus. And this kind of gives them comfort that this thing is, even though I'm still trying to work to do something, but I think we should take that narrative on the road, because, students be stressed out that they can't make institutional change. And it's like, this thing is a whole lot bigger than you think. And the best thing you should be doing is getting your degree and be on the other side of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate
Mhm.
you, girl.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
And
Yeah.
thanks to the other panelists too. I really enjoyed this.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for spending time with us. And Thursday, there will be simultaneous QCM and AQC seminars. So we'll see you on Thursday in one of those. Okay, so everyone enjoy the rest of your evening.
One
Bye-bye.
second.
Oh,
one second.
okay, go Javon.
Thank you all for being here. Greatly appreciate it. All the emails that you've been getting from me, thank you for responding. Quick thing, I put in the chat the Twitter account and also the Facebook group. So all that stuff will come to me. I have to add you into the Facebook group. So some of you have already done that. So thank you. Lastly, if you are moving institutions or want to receive emails to some other email account, please let me know, because what I'm going to do is relook at all of it and update it just to make sure that everyone's account is correct. And if you have any questions, of course, please let me know.
Thank you, Javon. And thank you, everyone. Have a good day.